What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the man himself, Ian O'Neill from the Old Triangle podcast, to look ahead to Cage Warriors 161, their return to Dublin. Ian's obviously the top guy covering the Irish MMA scene at the moment, so who better to have on to talk about all the really good Irish MMA prospects. Ian, it's been a busy time in Irish MMA recently, hasn't it, with the big Bellator card. Obviously we have this Cage Warriors card, we have the PFL card coming up, I suppose, in the not too distant future as well. It's, you know, people have been giving out about Irish MMA a little bit, but it's a good time for Irish MMA, and another interesting card here. I won't say if it's good or bad, Jay. Maybe we'll talk about that in a second, but it's a busy time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We hardly have time to take a breath now in Irish mixed martial arts, with events that are coming up and more along the way as well this year, but it's a good place to be in. We have said it time and time again, all the shows that are coming to the UK and Ireland, all the competition that exists, that's only a good thing. And having these options for the fighters out there is brilliant to have. But you know what? We're talking about Cage Warriors, and Cage Warriors have been doing it for many, many years, and they're returning back to Dublin, and they always put on a good show, and I'm very excited for this upcoming card as well. And I said to you before, I even donning the old yellow hoodie to honour the yellow gloves of Cage Warriors today as well, so I'm excited to get into the card and to have a little chat about it.
Yeah, my Cage Warriors gloves up there behind me, handed to me by Graham Byland the last time, so we're doing...
Send them over to me, please.
We're doing well. I actually saw one of the Bellator staff bringing out a pair of gloves the last time. I was like, oh, are they for me? And no. I thought I was getting a pair of Bellator gloves. I could have the Bellator gloves over at this side in as well, but no, unfortunately. Come here, let's get into it. Let's talk about the card. The first thing, though, I feel like Paul Hughes has kind of saved this card. And if people are just tuning in and maybe haven't heard about the card, Paul Hughes, who I interviewed over in SevereMMA last week, said that, you know, he'd been offered a couple of tries, I suppose, at the UFC. He was injured for one. There was visa issues for the other one. And I think he just decided he had put the UFC Paris card down as his date to, to either get to the UFC or take a fight in Cage Warriors. Once that passed, he decided to take the fight in Cage Warriors, and he comes in here and he headlines it. And Ian, this card needed Paul Hughes, didn't it? And we'll get in more into his fight in a second. But the card overall, if it didn't have Paul Hughes in it, I think it would be a big, big struggle. So for the Irish fans going and for people tuning in, we will talk about the whole card, but Paul Hughes was really a necessity to have on this one, wasn't he?
Absolutely, and you know, given based off what he said to you in your interview as well, maybe they knew a little bit more behind the scenes, but we were looking from the outside in. And, you know, we were a couple of weeks before the card and there was no main event announced. And I think, you know, what we've been talking about on the Old Triangle and stuff like that as well, is that there was nobody really a part of Irish MMA that was kind of set up to be in a super big fight, whether it be a title fight or a number one contendership. And that's just because we're in a period of time where we're building a lot of these fighters too. And, you know, we'll get into the card about some of the other fighters that are on it as well. But the addition of Paul Hughes, just, I tweeted it and I said it adds an extra spice to this card, and it was needed. And, you know, that's not necessarily Cage Warriors' fault either, because, you know, we've been lucky where we've had the likes of Rhys McKee or the likes of Caelan Loughran who have since moved on, and now we're in this kind of transitional period where we're waiting for the next guy to come through. But obviously it didn't work out, and the move over to the UFC didn't work out for Paul, so this is the only place that he needs to be, and it's brilliant to see him back. It's brilliant to see him competing again, and I'm just very excited, and so should everybody else, about seeing Paul Hughes and the rest of the Irish talent on the card as well, really. Yeah,
100%. I think Cage Warriors do a great job of giving some spotlight to the Irish talent, given a place like this for him to fight, as do Bellator and PFL and other places, and they've done that again here. I just think what you said there is correct, though. We're kind of in a transitional period at the moment for almost all of the Irish fighters, even like Paul Hughes even as well, but he's in a transition from the top of Cage Warriors maybe into the UFC, so him headlining this is almost a bonus. Like, we had Reece McKee, who won the title and went to the UFC last time. We had Caelan Loughran, who's a champion, and went to the UFC. Like, even we had James Sheehan fighting in probably what would have been a number one contender fight against Oban Elliott. Unfortunately, he lost that fight, and Oban Elliott moves to the UFC. Let's say if he'd won that fight, we'd probably see James Sheehan here maybe headlining this card in a title fight. So it's unfortunate timing, I suppose, for Cage Warriors. They can't just pull someone out of the bag. That's going to be a big, exciting fight. They're all in transitional fights, I think at the moment, which is understandable, but also, in my opinion, it does lead to the card being a bit weaker than you would expect. For a big enough venue like the RDS, obviously they're not doing the biggest venue in the Tree Arena. It'll be interesting to see how many tickets they sell. It'll be interesting to see how they set it up. But I just wonder if it's a case of, when they have a card maybe that isn't the biggest in the world, they might go to the RDS. And I wonder if they have like a really big card. Let's say Paul Hughes fights George Hardwick and they decide to do it in Ireland if he wins here. And let's say James Sheehan's fighting for a title, or let's say Ryan Shelley's fighting for a title, and they decide to do it in the Tree Arena. Would that be a thing? Or, whatever it might go. I wonder. And I think that'd actually be a cool thing if this is set up for a smaller crowd, and obviously it will be, but like a small crowd, and they have kind of the Irish fight nights, and then the Irish, pay-per-view nights that are not pay-per-view, but you know what I mean. I think that would be good, but I'm skeptical on that. I just feel like if you are a casual fan and you're like, oh, there's MMA on this weekend, you look at the card, is it going to draw you in? Like, I think Paul Hughes will, and he's a massive, massive difference here, like massive. But the rest of it, I'm not so sure. And that's not taking anything away from any of the lads on the card. I think that's kind of just where they are at the moment. Now, could Cage Warriors have done more? Like, the last time I kind of criticised Cage Warriors because I think they could have done more. Now, I spoke to Graham Boylan and I put that to him, and he was like, yeah, we probably could have, but we just didn't. It didn't happen. This guy wasn't able to fight. This guy was injured. This didn't work out. And fair enough, he was very open and honest about it. And I think that's the case again here. They like, getting Paul Hughes on the card, I think was a real Hail Mary for them and a real fucking massive thing for them. But the rest of it, it just doesn't stack up with that last Cage Warriors card even, but also the big Bellator cards. Like, the PFL card coming up for like Franz Malambo is going to be in €100,000 championship match, as is John Mitchell. We're probably going to see Dylan Chuk on it. Like, we could have some other big name, and we're probably going to, we might even see Cedric Doumbé, we might see the Lazy King on it. Like, that's a card that's really, really good. We saw Johnny Eblin, we saw Fabian Edwards on the Bellator card. Now, Cage Warriors are going to struggle to meet that because they don't have that amount of money to pay those sort of guys, and they don't have that, I suppose, famous of fighters because they go to the UFC, but still, that's the world they're in, Ian, isn't it? And that's the kind of the world they're competing with. It is a tough situation for Cage Warriors, and like we obviously there is the explanation of what they are and where they are, but still, if you're looking to buy a ticket, and if you're in the business of selling tickets like Cage Warriors, PFL and Bellator are, it's tough to look at the Cage Warriors card against the other two and go, oh, I'll buy the ticket for that card, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. But to credit Cage Warriors, they have been dealt with this problem through the years. I mean, they're on the go for 13 years right now. We've seen lots of promotions come and go. Their product is tried, true, and tested through all of this. And, to go back, what I said is that, yeah, there might not be any standout marquee fighters on it, but we've definitely got some of the ingredients to kind of flourish a lot of these fighters on the cards. A lot of fighters who are early on in their career, a lot of fighters who are coming back off a loss and wanting to prove themselves as well. So I would look at this as a builder card to the next time when they come back to Dublin, and, the fighters will be in a different position as well. But I like the fact that they are doing this in the RDS. I loved the Tree Arena show, but I always relate to Cage Warrior shows for this tight-knit crowd, this boisterous atmosphere, and I'm very looking forward to seeing the RDS kind of venue, and imagine that's what's going to create. You remember you were down in the Neptune Arena in Cork as well, and when you see a good knockout, the whole place is going nuts. We got guys jumping out into the crowd, like they're still showing pictures of Conor jumping out. We've seen Reece jump out into the crowd, and time again just creates that atmosphere. And if no one tunes in and watches it live, maybe somebody who's going to tune in and watch a replay might catch that and go and watch back the card as well. And it's one thing that Cage Warriors have done so well through all of the years that they've been in existence, is creating that connection between the fighters and the fans. And that's a huge help in the growth of fighters and their following. And we've seen that with Conor, and who just took it by the scruff of the neck and went on with it. So I would give him credit in that. And I'm really looking forward. I don't believe there has been a mixed martial arts event in the RDS before. So I'm curious to see what the layout is. I've been up there before, but not for a kind of a mixed martial arts event. So I'm sure they're going to look to try and create that tight-knit crowd and create that boisterous atmosphere as well on this event.
Yeah, the last time I was in the RDS, I saw Kanye West, I believe. So that
legend. It was too bad. You could have seen Marcellus.
That's when he was good as well, back in the day. But, yeah.
Harsh.
And just a final thing before we get into the fights. It's not that this card is bad. It's just it doesn't stack up in comparison to the other cards. And we have to say that. We have to be fair, and we have to put them on that. But we also have to say, like, there's probably scope for this card to have more UFC fighters, going on. We all know, look, we can say what we want. The UFC is the level. It has scope to have more UFC fighters than any of those cards. Like, you look back at this card in a few years and go, James Sheehan made it to UFC. Oh, Solomon Simon made it to UFC. And maybe Jer Harris or someone else. These guys made it to UFC. Like, you look back at another Cage Warriors card from years and years ago, and, you might see Paul Redmond, you might see Artem Labov, you might see, Richie Smullen or someone like that on the card and go, oh, look, this is where it wins. So that's what Cage Warriors offer as well. It's weird because you have to look at it in both of those ways. Like, it's in the business of selling tickets versus Bellator versus BFL, but it's not in that business in terms of the way the promotion is run. What the promotion is a farm to get you to be the best fighter in the world. And we've had that discussion many times over the years, but that's what we have here again on Saturday night upcoming. Right, let's get into the fights. Let's talk about Paul Hughes versus Yann Quaeyhaegens first of all. Ian, look, Paul has been out now. I said it to him in the interview. It's exactly 11 months since his last fight, going in against Quaeyhaegens, who is a guy who has fought, a lot over the last few years, apart from the pandemic side of it. He was out for 3 years because of that. He came back and he fought twice last year. This is his second fight again this year. He was very, very active before that. I think he fought 4 and 5 times in years previous as well. From Paul Hughes though, first of all, what are you expecting to see from him? He's up at 155 now as well. We must say that. He is a guy who, every time he speaks, you believe him when he says, I've made improvement after improvement after improvement. Could be a little bit of ring rust, I suppose, to put on with that as well. It is relatively short notice, but he has the UFC hanging over him again. If he gets a big, massive win here, he's going to the UFC more than likely, probably, maybe not. You never know. But what are you expecting from Paul Hughes here?
What I expect to see from Paul Hughes here is y'all must have forgot kind of a performance, because he's coming in off a phenomenal win of Jordan Vucenic for the featherweight title, moving up in weight and facing Yann Quaeyhaegens, who is a difficult task for him. But I don't think, coming in here and putting on a clinic and winning a decision is going to do Paul Hughes any justice here. I think based off hearing him speaking to you, Sean, he's coming in here with a real chip on his shoulder. And Paul was kind of a guy who always had a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but I think it's an even bigger chip right now, because he's watching all of his teammates going on, like Reese and Caelan Locker and everyone getting signed up, and he was left out in the lurch. Obviously there was a couple of opportunities. There was a difficult spell that he had to go through, so what he has to do is manifest that difficult last 11 months that he has had and throw it all in there for the 15 minutes or however long that the fight lasts with Yann Quaeyhaegens, and make himself undeniable. And I believe that he has the skills and the mindset to do just that here. And I think, the accumulation of whatever results happen with him coming in here with a big point to prove in the main event is going to make it for a fantastic fight, because, Yann Quaeyhaegens is a difficult challenge for Paul Hughes. He's a good fighter. He's got some knockout power. So Hughes isn't going to come in here and walk all over him. He's going to have to be at his best. He's going to come in at his best. And it's going to be a decent fight, but I'd expect Paul Hughes to be really pushing for a finish here. And if he does that, it's going to make for a fantastic fight.
Yeah, 100%. As Paul said to me, like, Yann Quaeyhaegens is not coming here to make up the numbers either, not coming here to lose. I think he's 100% finishing record in his wins in his career, and that's nothing to be sniffed at. Like, he's good on the ground, he hits hard, he's a big 155er, and as Paul is moving up. But I think you make some very, very good points against about Paul. Like, I think it is one of those fights where he has to make a statement, because he's made many statements before, but they've kind of fallen on deaf ears to a certain extent. And I think now, look, he came out and he did that interview. I think a lot of people, it's funny, a lot of people picked that up. But even before that, Luke Thomas was talking about him. Every time there's a featherweight fight, people are like, this fight's really on the UFC card and Paul Hughes isn't in the UFC. Or when Charrier gets signed, it feels like his name has been mentioned. And it's brilliant that the fact that he signed the fight and it's happening within 2 to 3 weeks, and obviously it's happening this Saturday night, I think that's really big for him, because if he announced the fight and it was 6 months down the line, maybe that could fade a little bit. But I think this is real good timing for him right now. I think the 11 months won't be a massive issue, to be honest. I think he's been injured for a good few months of that. Then he was kind of coming back. Then he was, preparing and trying to stay in there to have a fight. He had a few dates in mind. I think he's been in the gym. He's had the opportunity to go to America, I think twice, maybe, if I'm not mistaken, in that time. He's as you said, Reece McKee was preparing for big title fights, and others in his gym preparing for big title fights. I think he'll be all right from that side of it. The other side of it, though, that I just want to mention to you, we'll maybe end the talk on this fight on this, but the mental side of it, I think, is massive, because we touched on it that this is a fight he needs to impress in. Does he need to get a finish? Maybe he does need to get a finish. Like, you went in there against Jordan Vucinic, as you mentioned, probably put on the most devastating display possible in a decision win, and that wasn't good enough. So what's better than that? A decision a finish the weight class up. But having that on your mind, having the 11 months out on your mind, having the kind of like, we've all felt it, I suppose, in our lives at different times. Like, oh, well, I was supposed to take the next step and I'm still here. I'm still in cage, right? I was supposed to be fighting in front of 15,000 people in the UFC, and now I'm fighting in front of, 1,500 people in the RDS or whatever it might be. That mental side of it must be so tough, and that's really something he needs to overcome, isn't it?
It definitely is, because there is a lot of pressure on this fight. There will be a big spotlight on him. There will be more eyes on him too. So, I like how he's talking ahead of this fight. I like that he's not kind of saying, oh, this should have happened or that should have happened. He spoke to you very well. He laid out everything. It seems that he's processed that in his mind. He's put it to bed. And now he's focused on what's ahead. And, what's ahead is in his complete control here. And, he needs to go out and put the performance in. And then after the fact, he needs to go out and call his shot. He's a very cool, calm and composed fella, inside and outside the cage. But he needs to go absolutely batshit crazy on the mic for me and call the UFC and say, what's going on here? Maybe he needs to do what Reece McKee and break out the UFC flip-flop or something like that, maybe to give himself an extra chance. But I mean, we can simply go in here and talk about the fight itself and talk about skills for skills, but it's everything else that you just mentioned there as well. The extra pressure, what's gone on, what can happen? Would an injury happen? When you're getting prepared, if you make a mistake and you're fighting against a guy with the power of Yann Quaeyhaegens, one little slip and you could find yourself rocked or in trouble. And even at that, when you're trying to get to the UFC, you want to be winning as cleanly as possible and you want to be finishing as cleanly as possible. So there's lots of exterior stuff going on, but I think what makes an elite fighter is being able to kind of fight through all of that. And I believe that's what Paul Hughes is. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing him going out there and just showcasing his abilities and kind of reminding us why he's so good and why he deserves to be in the UFC, because I know you have said it and I've said it. I think he's fighting at an ability that would see him be competitive against ranked opponents inside the UFC's featherweight division.
There's no doubt about that. Like, I had some reservations about Paul before the last fight, but after that Jordan Vucinic display, I'm like, this guy is a top 30 featherweight in the world, only like, what is he, 10 fights into his career or whatever he is, and that's a crazy thing to say. Look, now he's at lightweight. I wonder will it go back? He go back down to featherweight at some stage. I suppose we'll talk about that maybe in a post show. But that's a massive fight. That's a massive fight to look forward to. And as you said, Quaeyhaegens is the type of guy who can hit hard. He's coming to win. He's coming to take the shine off Paul Hughes. There's no doubt about that. Because what happens if you beat Paul Hughes? Then the UFC are looking at you. You know, so it's a massive fight for him and a really, really good headliner. Let's move on. Let's talk about Ryan Shelley, because Ryan Shelley was, let's say Paul Hughes has moved to 155. Ryan Shelley was the guy maybe next in line, a lot of people thought, that was going to fight for the 145-pound title. He won that very close fight with Matthew Elliott. He beat Josh Reed, but unfortunately he lost last time out to be a Cirilla in another really good, fun fight. We saw his brother fighting 2 weeks ago, a guy who was 2-2 in his career, and he's done a brilliant job of turning that around, and I think he's 5-2 now, isn't he? On such a great run. Chris Fields' gym seems just like the perfect gym to turn around from a loss. They seem very process driven, and for Ryan Shelley, this is a massive opportunity, isn't it? That, like, let's say they come back to Ireland this time next year. If he's on maybe a 2-fight, 3-fight win streak going into that card, he very well could be fighting for the Cage Warriors title. So when you're in Cage Warriors, you're never too far away if you're at that level, are you? And for Ryan Shelley, you said about Paul Hughes, we know his quality. We know Ryan Shelley's quality as well. I feel maybe that to be a Cirilla fight was one fight too soon, but I think his opponent, Jordy Bakkes, is a good opponent. I'll talk about him in a second. But for Ryan Shelley, first himself, Ian, he is a real top talent, isn't he? And this is a massive fight, because if you put two in a row, losses, it's a little bit different, but I'm sure he'll be open to get back to winning ways here. What do you see him? Tell us about Ryan Shelley.
Yeah, Ryan Shelley is a top-class prospect in the featherweight division and a really competitive featherweight division in Cage Warriors right now. Took his first loss of his professional career against Tobias Cirilla, but had some really good moments at the start of that fight. It was just he was just kind of caught at the end by Cirilla, and the right hook and the knee cost him. But there was rumours that the training camp didn't go all that well. So I'm really looking forward to, number one, to seeing him coming in here and performing and showcasing what he's after fixing after that loss. Okay, maybe there was some external stuff that was going on, but what a loss does to a lot of fighters is, it forces them to make changes. And I tell you what, there's no better gym that you want to be in to do that and be under the tutelage of Chris Fields and Tom King and Cottle Pendred and all the lads over at Team KF. And we saw a showcase in the development, as you mentioned, of Ryan's brother Adam at Cage Warriors Manchester, and he put on a fantastic performance, because both the Shelley brothers are coming in there with an extensive taekwondo and striking backgrounds, and very little people that want to actually stand and bang with them. But you'd be fooled for thinking that Ryan Shelley has a taekwondo background, because he's coming in here, he's getting submissions. I remember the back take that he got against Liam Malloy was absolutely phenomenal, on route to getting a rear naked choke win. He has a couple of submissions under his belt right now, but his background is taekwondo. What Ryan Shelley is right now is a mixed martial artist, and a well-rounded mixed martial artist, and he's coming in hungry here off of his first loss. And if that fight had went different ways, we talked about it at the start of this podcast, we would have been probably talking number one contendership, if not a title fight here for Ryan Shelley. I think a win here. Yeah, you're talking headliner. The same for James Sheehan. I'm sure we'll be talking about James in a few minutes as well. And look, there's nothing more in general that I love in mixed martial arts. And, it's great seeing a guy going on an undefeated streak, but you really find out truly about yourself as a fighter, about how you react after the first loss of your career. And this is what we have to look forward to with Ryan Shelley. And he's coming in here against a difficult guy in Jordy Bakkes as well. Yeah, 100%.
Like, I watched a bit of him, and he fought a couple of times in Cage Warriors, and they were calling him a judo guy coming into it. And he's as you said with Ryan Shelley, he's a mixed martial artist. Now, it's funny because Bakkes is almost not a mixed martial artist. He's almost just a striker at times. But then there's one of his fights, a guy jumped into his hands and he absolutely slammed him down to the ground. He's a really good grappler. He just doesn't like to use it. It seems like he's no interest in it at all. He's a wild striker, and it's very odd for Shelley to get someone who's going to strike with him, but I do think Bakkes will. Another part of it though as well, before we move on, you know, you talked about Shelley there grappling and you know, using maybe throwing in a few takedowns. Bakkes does get taken down. So if you're Shelley here, you know, if you're winning on the feet, why not throw in a takedown as well and win the fight even more clearly? So look, I do think this one, if I have to give my pick for this, I'm going for Ryan Shelley to win. I'm going for Paul Hughes as well to win in the main event. But I do think this is a very favourable matchup for Ryan Shelley, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. You mentioned James Sheehan. Let's talk about him next. He's a very big fight here against Olli Santalahti, whose name I pronounced absolutely perfectly there. You know, James Sheehan, another one of these guys, like his opponent in his last fight, Oban Elliott. He'll fight anyone, anytime, any place. Another guy who tasted defeat early in his career and was able to come back and go on a great win streak. Like in his first fight in Cage Warriors, he fought Matthew Bonner, who go on to become the middleweight champion. He fought Ian Gary in his third fight, who's gone on to be, you know, one of the top contenders in the UFC. And he fought the likes of Emil Brown. He fought the likes of Jamie Richardson, who fought for titles before. And he went on to be, you know, 6-3. Then he fought Oban Elliott, lost a very close fight to Oban Elliott last time out, who's now in the UFC as well. And he's trying to put it back together here again. His opponent, Ian, 13-5 in his career. He's fought some very, very good guys down through the year. Alex Lahore, Adam Proctor, Nathan Jones, you know, some of the top names that have been on, I suppose, this scene in the last while. And, you know, he's a big hooker. He loves throwing hooks from the orthodox stance. He kind of reaches in though, likes a takedown. He's good off his back, but does get kind of taken down himself. Talk to us about James Sheehan against a guy like that. Like James Sheehan with his good straight shots down the middle against the guy who hooks. It kind of looks like a bit of manna for heaven for James Sheehan with his kind of very good technical style, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, technical is the perfect word for James Sheehan here. Like, and you know, as we're talking about this card, it's kind of a trend that's forming here. Another guy that has a point to prove coming off that loss of Oban Elliott. And the last time that James Sheehan lost, he went on a 5-fight win streak. One of those wins was against Emil Brown, who was fighting for the welterweight title, the vacant welterweight title, in just a couple of events on Cage Warriors 163. So, I mean, he is all the cannon fodder that he needs to come in and prove a point in this fight and get himself back into the mix at the 175 or 70 pound division in Cage Warriors. But speaking of his style, very technical, not afraid to take a fight down as well, and he'll use the takedowns to open up his striking. Very good top game, doesn't waste anything. So when you see James, everything is tight, doesn't waste any shots. You know, will shoot in for a takedown, doesn't shoot from a mile out. Just everything is very well thought out, and that's something that I've spoken to him on a couple of occasions that he likes to focus on. And he's coming in here now off of a loss. He has a chance to put himself right back in the title mix with a win. And, you know, there's nothing more than you want in a division than a win over a guy who could potentially become the champion, because that's a fight that sells easy. And that's what James Sheehan has right in front of him here, if he can get over Santalahti on a Cage Warriors in Dublin there. Yeah,
when you beat a guy with 20 plus fights in his career as well, that's a surefire sign, I suppose, that you're at that level. And as you say, if Emil Brown wins that title, you know, I think Andy Ryan and that crew will be definitely looking for a title shot for James Sheehan next. And, you know,
and credit to James for coming in and taking a fight like this too. I mean, the man doesn't take any. I mean, we're talking about a guy who fought Ian Gary in his first professional fight here, and, you know, he never takes the easy fight, doesn't want to take the easy fights. Coming off of a loss here, didn't take a gimme fight. So I give him and the team max credit for accepting this fight, and very excited to see what James Sheehan does in here.
100%. Arguably fight of the night coming in here, Mason Jones versus Yann Liasse. Liasse coming off of a loss to George Hardwick for the title, but coming into that, I gave him a big chance coming in. This guy is a good fighter. He's a good all-round fighter. He can wrestle, he can strike, he can do it all. And I think he will put up a better fight against Mason Jones than he did against George Hardwick. Hardwick kind of slow played him in that one and ended up finishing him. I think he'll be more prepared for that against Mason Jones. But for Mason Jones, I know you've been a big Mason Jones fan, as have I, for a long time. He had a very squeaky kind of UFC run. There was no contests and fights cancelled and a few losses in there and everything like that. And I think the problem with Mason Jones, right, was he fought Joe McColgan in that mad pandemic fight, and then he went up a weight class, beat Adam Proctor in a great win, but that was like he never should have gone up to welterweight, I don't think. And then he kind of turned around in 3 or 4 months to get into the UFC, lost that fight, ended up coming back with a win, but lost again after. It just feels like everything that was going perfect for him as an undefeated fighter at 12-0 or whatever it was, 9-0, 10-0, sorry, it just all kind of turned up a bit for him. And I think he came into Cage Warriors 3 months ago. He had a fight, won that, and now he's coming in here again to have another one. And I think if he has another one and another one and another one and win them, 4 or 5 fights in a row, that's exactly what Mason Jones needs here. He's only 28 years of age. He's only still young, but this is massive for him because this isn't an easy fight, Ian, is it? And I know, like, Mason Jones, for people on the scene here, I think he's massive respect, but I don't know, does he have that same respect that he deserves on the international scene? But he's out here, I think, to kind of gain that again, isn't he?
Absolutely. I kind of liken Mason Jones's story to a little bit like Rhys McKee as well, where we've seen Rhys compete on the regional scene, but it just hadn't gone his way so far in the UFC. And it's the same thing with Mason Jones here as well. And obviously, look, we've talked to Rhys. I'd love to get the chance to talk to Mason just to kind of see what he's thinking at this stage of his career, because, this is his second go of it. He needs to kind of build himself up. He's taken the right fights. Obviously, it was important to come back. He came back against Alexander Ribeiro, got a good win in round 1. But coming in against Yann Liasse is a very difficult fight. And it's the same thing as I said about Paul Hughes. If you're not coming in with your I's dotted or your T's crossed, you're going to have a difficult night in there. I think Yann Liasse kind of got a raw deal of it against George Hardwick, who just put on a phenomenal performance in that and just kind of countered everything that he had to offer. But Liasse is a kind of a tricky guy on the feet. Mason Jones himself carries power. So I think you label this as a fight of the night, and it's a pretty sure and tried and tested. Apart from if, the main event turns into somewhat of a competitive fight, that could be labelled it. But these two guys are coming in. Obviously, Liasse has to come in and get over that loss over Hardwick. Mason Jones is looking to get back onto the big stage as well. And you've got to win if you want to get back onto the big stage. So I'm very excited to see Mason Jones sticking at lightweight as well. I think it was a very good point that you made. You don't want to be jumping up and down from weight class to weight class every fight. It does some strange things to your body. You can't get used to fighting at a particular weight. And, Mason Jones will stick at lightweight. He'll pick up a few wins. Be interesting to see if a win here will set up a title fight, maybe with Hardwick down the line. Maybe he'll choose to go the Paddy Pimblett route and not maybe get involved with the title again in Cage Warriors. But, I'm glad that, this fight is going to be a good showcase fight for the Dublin fans up there. And I'm sure that they'll be buzzing as it's happening, because these two guys are going to go out and throw bombs.
Yeah, and this is the fight I think that's more comparable to, like, the Eblin fights, or the, bringing the PFL, maybe bringing over, say like a Clay Collard, maybe if he was in the card or something. I think this is one that's comparable to that.
I thought this would be up along. I was full sure, without knowing that Paul Hughes was going to headline the card, I thought maybe they'll bring Mason Jones over, maybe they'll create a vacant title, or maybe they'll try get the I called for the Hardwick fight when Hardwick lost that contender series. Obviously, it was a little bit too soon for him coming back off that fight, and that's completely understandable. But Mason Jones is a man on a mission right now, and I'm very excited to see him going in there and see what he can do against a good opponent.
100%. As someone who covers the amateur scene in Ireland as well as the pro scene, there's 3 of the most active amateurs of all time really on this card, in Solomon Simon, Ger Harris and Alexander O'Sullivan. All have had 10 plus amateur fights, all have competed at the IMAFs. This is a real, we talked at the start about you could look back in years to come at this being a card that has top level fighters on it. Those 3, tell us about those 3 just quickly, Ian, I suppose, that have been around for a long time and really, like, even though they're all only 2-3 fights into their career, Ger Harris is 3-1 now, but they've earned this spot really, haven't they? And what they've done as an amateur has made the Irish scene really excited about all 3 of them.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Solomon Simon fought almost 17, 18 times at amateur and fought against some of the highest level competition in the regional scene in Ireland, and also moved over and competed on the IMAF scene as well. Picked up some wins and losses, but, didn't care about wins and losses, and that's the way you should be thinking. And he's got himself nicely primed up now for professional. Came onto the professional scene with a good TKO win over Nikolai Ivanovic at a regional show in Ireland, and then kind of come in against Kalashnikov at Cage Warriors 153 to pick up a win on his Cage Warriors debut. He got to finish that fight. I know he would have been happy to get the finish, and he'll be looking to build upon that when he comes in here against Sarasjarvi in the Dublin event. But Solomon Simon is one of these guys who's an established, well-rounded fighter early in his professional career, and the experience that he gets in, let alone the professional ranks, but how Cage Warriors like to build fighters, it adds all the ingredients for a very promising future for Solomon Simon. Moving on to Ger Harris, a real character coming over. We've seen him recently fight over at Anthony Pettis FC over in the States. We've seen him fighting on the European scene as well. A guy that has real good power, a guy that has recently moved to Team Rhino, and we've seen him developing his grappling skills to go along with that power on his hands as well. At 125 pounds, I think, Ger, I'd love to see him, and I'm not sure. I think this is only a one-fight deal with Cage Warriors, but I feel Cage Warriors is the perfect fit for a guy like Ger Harris, where, you can get Ian Dean working his magic. He's in against a guy called Ryan Hewitt this time. I feel it's a very winnable fight for him. I think it was a smart signing by Cage Warriors. Ger has a good following up in Dublin, always brings the entertainment, is in very exciting fights. Win or lose, I know he's lost once in his career, but showcase that his grappling is coming leaps and bounds with Team Rhino, with a good submission off his back with the triangle in the last fight. He's won a fight by 20-second KO. I've seen him drop the guy with throwing the first punch in a fight. So I mean, yeah, Ger Harris brings the entertainment, and he's a very valuable addition to the to this card as well. Alexander O'Sullivan, I think Alexander O'Sullivan is probably the most established amateur that we've ever seen coming out of Irish mixed martial arts. 2-0 in his professional career right now. Another guy similar enough to Solomon, who kind of cut his teeth a lot and didn't rush his amateur career, had something like 20 or 30 fights at amateur as well, which is almost unheard of, Sean. I mean, you show me, I think Mohamed Mahayev doesn't even have as much amateur fights as Alexander O'Sullivan. One thing I respect greatly about Alexander O'Sullivan is that he's running a gym called CMAC Gym out of Dublin, Ireland. And while he's developing his own skills and developing his own professional career, he's always providing his knowledge to his students at the gym as well, and helping them grow up as well. And somewhat unselfishly with Alexander O'Sullivan, he's almost put his career on hold for a couple of years to help those guys at the gym, the likes of Keith Kyo and Jordan Bradshaw and a few of those other guys coming up from CMAC. And he's developed those guys, and he's put his own career on the back burner. Now is his chance to come up. Signing with Cage Warriors was an absolute dream for me to see, because I think that there's some great fights for him there. And Alexander O'Sullivan is he's a guy that I would be fairly confident in saying that, we're going to see him go up there, compete for Cage Warriors titles, and maybe move on further to the bigger show again after that. Don't want to speak too much too soon. Anything can happen in the early days, but he went out, he's picked up 2 armbar wins in his first 2 professional fights, coming in here against the 2-0 Moroccan gentleman Bilal Labid. He should get the win here, and I would imagine he'd get the finish as well. And look, there's one more, there's 2 more. I mean, Taka Mhandu and Paddy McCorry on the card as well, if you would like me to talk about them. Or
absolutely, go on it. You're on a roll. Do it.
I'm on a roll here. Taka Mhandu came back. He took a fight on 6 days notice on the last Cage Warriors card that he fought on, up a weight class as well. Taka has had a bit of a hit and miss of the start to his professional career in terms of there's been wins and losses. He fought over in Africa's EFC, picked up a win and a loss over there, got a good win on the regional scene, a cage conflict in Ireland, was unlucky to get caught on against Benoit Blanc in a Darce choke, and then came back and, like I said, won that short notice fight at Cage Warriors 157 against Grant Ogborn, up a weight class. He's back down at 135. He's taken on Alexander Sasha Pirev. And Taka is a real flowy kind of a striker. Beautiful jab, beautiful calf kick, has the ability to dictate where the fight goes. And I think Taka with the right mentality and the right preparation can go in there and beat anyone in the 135 pound division. And I'm very excited to see him kind of muster up a bit of a run inside of Cage Warriors. I'll finish with Paddy McCorry. And Paddy McCorry, to me, is one of the top prospects and in Ireland right now, coming up on the professional scene. His only loss was to James Webb, a fight that he took on short notice, but he's picked up all finishes in the rest of his 3 fights. And in the middleweight division, I feel that Paddy McCorry is a guy that we're going to be talking about for many years to come. I think he's coming in here against Kadi, who's 4-1. The belief that he has, the skill set that he has, the dexterity that he has in his striking, he just has all the ingredients to be a really special fighter inside the middleweight division. And, there's a gap there at Cage Warriors, and there's a gap there on the big leads for great middleweight fighters. And I definitely think that Paddy McCorry, he's a future Cage Warriors champion for me. I'd be very confident in saying that. And I would expect Paddy McCorry over the next couple of years to go and develop up the rankings, win the title, and move on to the UFC. Just everything that I've seen, everything that I've heard, we've spoken to him on the old triangle, and just a guy that knows what he wants, is willing to put the work in, and has the skill sets to back it up as well. So I'm very excited to see him compete on Cage Warriors Dublin as well. And that's the roundup. Back over to you, Shawnee.
Do you know what's great as well, though, and fair play to you for all that? What a big criticism of Bellator, especially over the last while, is it's all SPG, right? And it's all one gym. This one, we have FAI, we have Team Rhino, we have Solomon Simon from down in Waterford, we have obviously Team KF very well represented, and you mentioned CMAC as well with Alexander O'Sullivan. That's a lot of gyms on one card, and it's absolutely fantastic to see it. And I think Irish people like that, and I think they will support that as well. Just a couple of things, and a few people you mentioned there, I think, and a few of the matchups maybe even. I agree with you on the Ger Harris Hewitt fight. I think Hewitt is a good jab and a good striker, but if you don't have a takedown against Ger Harris, I think it's going to be tough. Like, watching back Ger Harris fights, he's a real good athlete, and watching a lot of MMA fights, you don't see that many real good athletes, and he definitely is one. Another guy who's a really good athlete is Kadi, fighting against Paddy McCorry. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if both of them went on and became Cage Warriors 185 pound champions. They fight similarly, hands down, wild on the outside. This is a Sean Sheehan type of fight. I love this sort of fight. I think that's going to be a real good one as well. And I agree with you on Taka. I think his opponent, Alexander Sasha Pirev, is a guy who will fight the way Taka wants to fight. He'll come in and he'll strike with him. I think if Taka throws in maybe a takedown as well, as I said, with his teammate Ryan Shelley earlier on, that might work a little bit. Pirev is one of those guys where if you kind of go forward at him, dip underneath for a takedown, he's open for it. But he's also, watch this, and I guarantee you, watch this fight. Pirev, out of his first 10 strikes, I guarantee you 9 of them will be kicks. This guy does nothing but kick. So I think, do you know what? He's the 2 Shelley brothers in camp with him as well, 2 Taekwondo guys. It's probably good lads for a preparation for him. So yeah, very, very interesting. You mentioned, Alexander O'Sullivan. I mentioned the fight as well. Very good. And the last fight that we haven't mentioned is Sean Clancy against Milton, Afonso, Cabral. Clancy coming out of West Scotland is another guy, coming through who people are talking about an awful lot. He's just getting his first opportunity now in Cage Warriors again after a long amateur career, and it's these are the type of opportunities that guys like that get, so he's fought twice already in 2023, looking to make it 3-0 in 2023 there. So that's it. I've taught myself in from saying at the start it's not a great card to now being really excited about it. So that's
we got you in the end, Shawnee. We got you. It is. It's a fantastic look. You're not wrong on what you're saying. There might not be enough marquee fights on this, but what this card is to me as a guy and like yourself who follows the Irish mixed martial arts scene, it's a showcase of all the talents from all the gyms across Ireland. It's chances for guys to come in and prove who's next, who's going to be the next guy that'll make the push in Cage Warriors. who's going to be the next guy that will make the push into the big show. And that, for one, I'm always excited to see that with Irish fighters as I lose my breath.
It happens to be all the time. Ian, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you to everybody for listening. Follow Ian at Ian O'Neill MMA over on Twitter. Find the Old Triangle podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, and on the SevereMMA YouTube as well. And listen to all these other brilliant podcasts as well, and you'll get them all over on Twitter. Ian, thank you very much. Everyone out there, thank you very much for listening. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and we'll see you all next time.